Hi there, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make an arrangement of scraps and how to turn them into applique fabric using parchment paper and heat and bond light. And so here's the parchment paper that I use. Remember not to use wax paper. Wax paper and parchment paper are different. I know it doesn't seem like there's a big difference. And freezer paper is also different. Parchment paper will kind of keep everything not stuck to each other. Freezer paper will stick to something, and wax paper will just melt like crazy under your iron. So get parchment paper and your heat and bond light. And you can find that at almost any craft store and as well as at Walmart. Make sure that it's the heat and bond light. Do not get the red bag. Make sure it's the purple one. The red bag is for patches and things like that, and it's going to be really, really thick. You really don't want to use it on your sewing machine. And so here's the back part of the heat and bond light. It'll give you all the directions and stuff like that. But these are really for doing an individual thing. We're going to do a group thing. We're going to do a whole bunch of different colors at once instead of drawing it out, and it's kind of tedious doing just one thing at a time. So here's my pile of scraps. If I didn't have plans for these scraps, I would be lining them all up really closely on the parchment paper upside down and just making a big sheet of applique material, which is basically what we're going to do. But whenever I set these up, they're not going to all be able to have gaps. I mean, they're all going to have gaps in between them, which I usually hate. I like to use up as much of the heat and bond as I can. But I have, these are going to be turned into houses and windows and a harbor, a couple harbors. So we're going to deal with the gaps. So we're going to put them all together as best we can in a rectangle. You don't have to iron them first because we're going to iron them, but if you want to, go ahead. I did not. And so you just lay them out into a square, or not a square, a rectangle, actually as big as you want it to be, as big as your piece is. But make sure that it's face down. See how they're showing you that it's face down. It needs to be face down on the parchment paper on top of your ironing board. Make sure the parchment paper is there, because the parchment paper stops everything from sticking to each other, and it makes sure that you don't have to worry about any of the glue getting onto your ironing board. So here it is after it's been ironed. Sorry I didn't take a picture of me ironing it, but here it is after it's been ironed on the heat and bond side. So the parchment paper is underneath, and then the stuff is upside down. All the materials upside down, and then the parchment or the heat and bond is on top of it. And so, excuse me, so you hold it on there for about 2 seconds over each fabric. I usually do about 4 seconds because I'm kind of neurotic. And then you flip it over so that the parchment paper is on top and all the fabric is facing up, and you give it just one last good little run over with the iron, and then you can peel the parchment paper right off the top of it. So now you'll see all the fabric face up, and the heat and bond should be in the back on the bottom now. Now, instead of having to cut each piece out individually, we are going to just go ahead and peel them off. And it kind of seems a little bit tedious, but cutting is so tedious to me. So you'll see that you'll be able to peel it right off, and there should be a shiny side on the back. Your front fabric should have the pattern on it, and the back part should have the shiny on it. And that's how you know you did it right. I did a whole entire thing of vintage fabric, and now they all have the shiny side on the top, and they're pretty much unusable. So keep that in mind. Make sure that they're always face down. So there's the shiny. You can see that's the back side. And I'm going to take it, and it's actually going to be the roof for the navy base that I'm creating. And it's not going to be like an awesome navy base. It's just a structure to kind of tell the story of where the navy base is. So this is my little navy base in Ventura County, and it's Port Hueneme, if you're familiar with it at all. Okay, so then I put the parchment paper over because I don't know about all the glue still, and I want to make sure it doesn't get onto my iron. So put the parchment paper back over the top of the front sides of these guys. And I'm going to just iron it for about 5 seconds, make sure it gets on there really good. The parchment paper does add a layer of cooling, so sometimes you might want to go over it again, or get it right over to your sewing machine and tack it down. But so far I haven't had to tack anything down. Been really, 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 really lucky. And so parchment paper is good for the first round so that you don't get glue stuck. And here is the final result of a lot of the stuff we were using. A lot of this was already created. But today I put in the Coast Guard station, which is the red roof and the white building. And the blue building with the blue roof is the Navy base, and there's Port Hueneme Harbor and Channel Islands Harbor, and I was stationed there in the Coast Guard. And my son, we lived up in the mountains, and so when he was born, we lived there. And when we moved to Oregon, we lived here, and I just used those gingham patches, or gingham pieces, as windows. These are actually from my Aunt Colleen's stash from whenever she was younger than I am now, so it's pretty exciting. They all stink. They smell like, you know, old. They smell vintage, but they're so cool, so exciting to me. So I went ahead and took that and I created our farmhouse. Took another little piece of her vintage fabric and made a little red roof. We lived in a blue and red house next to some cute little hills. And these all have pine trees and stuff on them, so I wanted to make sure that this hill stood out differently. And then this is our current house. I just took some fat quarters. This is almost all fat quarters. I just took some fat quarters and did the width of most of them as my template. And so here's the house we live at now. It's just a cute little greenhouse and a garage, and we have a river behind us and a little hill and stuff like that. And here's some apartments we lived at a while back. And these were our apartments, and my best friend and her daughter lived over here. So me and my son and my dad lived over here, and she and her daughter lived over here. So we would always be running past the clubhouse to see each other, and then she ended up working at the clubhouse. So we spent a lot of time there. And this is one of the houses that we lived in as well. We call it the House on the Hill. It's in a place called Jasper, Oregon. It's a tiny little town. And so I still need to put trees up, and I need to put the Willamette River and our favorite little store down here. But this one's pretty much done. This is the end of the video. I hope that any of this stuff has helped you guys.